the issue of migration has really created a dent in the political, social, and the cultural facets of Africa. In fact, it's so much that it is a daily occurrence where African youth are dying in the Mediterranean, they are wasting their lives in the desert, and currently they are even being trafficked in Libya, especially, where militants have been using sub-Saharan African citizens as slaves, literally, and using them, raping some of them. Even men are raped in these processes, and reports coming out from there, it's so much of an eyesore. Yes, one important push factor is the fact that joblessness is one of the major ones, where African economies are not able to employ the teeming youth. We all know that Africa is the youngest continent in the world as far as demographics is concerned. The average or the median age is 19.5. That is, very young population. And these people need jobs. And without the jobs, they will definitely have to go elsewhere. That is one. Two, political intolerance. There are youth that belong to ethnicities that are not recognized in their own countries. And this recognition has to do with participation, giving equal rights and opportunities. So some people from particular ethnicities often migrate away from their countries towards Europe. Then we have conflicts. In recent times, we've seen violent extremism in the Sahel. This has caused a lot of destabilization and so much chaos, so that these young guys who cannot join the ranks of these militants have to migrate, and they use the desert way in order to get to Southern Europe via Libya and other North African countries.
Fidel, yeah. Those are very important push and pull factors, as you have stated there. The question is, of course, people who are leaving, and these are youth that are going in search of a better life, in search of safety, are going through dangerous terrain, and their lives are not better off anyway, for most of them, where they're going. How much of the information of what happens to their colleagues, their counterparts, their family members filters through back home, that it's actually very dangerous to get on those boats or whatever transportation systems to go to where they're going?
Yeah, that is a very important question. Now, in fact, there has been a lot of documentaries that has chronicled how they cross into Southern Europe, and over there people are into prostitution. They don't get jobs because they are not regular migrants and things of the sort. However, if they look at the situation back home, they will try their luck in quote elsewhere. And so no matter how these people are talked into moving away from such dangerous journey or disembarking, they will not, because they feel that, so what is there for us home? Home is full of hopelessness, despair, and so much poverty. And so they will, at least they have a perception of a brighter opportunity in Europe, a perception. And not long ago, there were two young men who sat on the rudder of a ship all the way from Gulf of Guinea to Europe. And that was a very dangerous journey. They did that. So they will do everything to leave the kind of despair and the kind of hardship that they find themselves in Africa or sub-Saharan Africa. So whichever information that comes out of Europe and how negative it could be, they are not moved by this information. They will rather try than to listen to those who have been there and perhaps have experienced the real truth on the ground.
So if it's a state of desperation, why Europe and why not Africa, which is supposedly a more friendlier and familiar terrain?
Unfortunately, African countries like South Africa have not been as friendly as we would expect them to be. We've heard several xenophobic attacks on fellow Africans in South Africa, where joblessness or unemployment in South Africa has translated into people getting angry and attacking their fellow Africans and accusing them of taking their jobs. We've seen that. Again, South Africa itself has fortified its borders with barbed wire and other things that we see on TV and other research that we do. And so African countries have not been as friendly as we would expect. In fact, if you compare South Africa to Europe, perhaps they are even safer in Europe than they will be in South Africa, because in Europe, Africans do not experience, especially in Western Europe, Africans do not experience xenophobic attacks.
But what about other African countries, apart from South Africa? Yes, it's well documented of the high level of xenophobia there. What about other African countries which are supposedly safer?
Yeah, so how is the economic performance of these countries? Are these countries doing better than European countries? No. These countries all have their own unemployment issues. It is not going to be Zimbabwe, neither is it going to be Angola, or let's say, are we talking about Mozambique or Ethiopia? No. These countries are all facing their problems. In fact, let's take the largest economy, Nigeria. Nigeria is the largest economy and also has the largest population. So it has its own population to take care of, with insecurity in the northeast and banditry and ethnic clashes between the Fulbe and the Hausa people in the north. These countries, even though they are doing well in nominal terms, they do not provide the necessary environment for such migration.
Of course, we see then hundreds of people perishing at sea and, being killed in some of these European countries. Is this an issue that can be dealt with at a regional level? Let's say ECOWAS, IGAD, SADC, or even with the African Union? Surely there's something that can be done about it?
So recently, the Tunisian government decided to whip up sentiments. The government that is facing its own economic challenges decided to whip up sentiments against sub-Saharan Africans who are living in Tunisia. Some had to evacuate as a matter of urgency, and some countries like Cote d'Ivoire sent aircraft to evacuate their citizens. Tunisia is not at war, neither it is at some crisis, except its economic problems that it's facing. So if a leader like that can do that against fellow Africans, then where do we come together, or when do we come together to actually address this issue? Currently, Tunisia is signing a deal with the European Union to stop Africans to getting onto their coast and then crossing onward to Europe. So these things, sometimes we tackle our issues in a more individualistic way in terms of countries. And so it does not allow collective brainstorming and discussions that leads to collective solutions. This is our problem. And so most of these organizations, AU, Tunisia is a member, South Africa is a member, all countries are members of the AU on the continent. Even Morocco is now getting along. We have ECOWAS, we have all the organizations, but mostly we decide to tackle our problems as individual states. And that has undermined or undercut the effectiveness or the efficacy of these regional organizations. So effectively, most of them have become forum where leaders meet, and the results that we are expecting to get from the discussions that have been held are not realized.
From an international or African security perspective, what are some of the things that can be done to address this situation? Because surely we cannot just leave it to go on like this.
So first is stability. And that stability has to do with fighting, especially violent extremism, because the prevalence of violent extremism has led to a situation where the areas closer to North Africa, that is the Sahel and the Savannah regions of West Africa, has been so much destabilized that the youth are then beginning to migrate northwards to find greener pasture and some peace of mind. Now, if you took the eastern half of Africa, currently Sudan is in turmoil. And Sudan happens to have one of the routes, migration routes that connects the Horn of Africa to Libya. And so with the chaos happening, that route that was closed earlier has been opened to migration. And so people are trooping into Libya. My contacts in Libya tell me that this is actually happening. This is actually happening. There's, multiple contacts. Again, if you consider even the upper part of Southern Africa, we are talking about DRC, we are talking about Mozambique, Angola, we still find people who will try to migrate to Europe from those regions, very southward, regions. So that stability is very important, that all these countries, we encourage stability in these countries. And this is where your earlier question, it becomes very relevant in the sense that ECOWAS, ECAS, SADC, and all those organizations must play roles in this stability. Again, prioritization of socio-economic development. Basic needs should be the fundamental issues that we tackle when it comes to security. If I don't find food to eat, you can't talk of security when I'm hungry. You can't talk of security when I'm not connected to the national grid, electricity. You can't talk of security when I don't have good water to drink. Neither can you talk about security when I cannot till my soil in peace and run agricultural lands in peace and to feed my family and myself. Again, we have to talk about leaders that are too autocratic and authoritarian, so much so that people cannot have space to participate politically within their countries.
So essentially, the continent is failing itself, but is the international community also failing? We have international organizations, the IOM, which is the International Organization for Migration, UNHCR, and so on. Are they doing enough?
Mostly, what I've come to learn about international organizations are that their effectiveness depends on the locality. Now, if the locality, or let's say the sub-region or the region is not ready to make changes, these organizations are more or less toothless bulldogs because they cannot effect change where there is no space to effect it. For instance, if West Africa is not ready to tackle its insecurity, UN can do little about it. The regional organization must take the initiative for the backing of these bigger organizations to be effective. That is what I've learned about international organizations. So international organization for migration would only be effective when African leaders decide to sit down and tackle this problem and by holding the bull by the horn and not waiting for some decision in Washington or in New York, Turtle Bay to, come before they take action. When that action has been taken, then the backing, financial strength, and other support would become consequential.
Thanks, Fidel. Yes, talking about African solutions for African problems, very important there. We want to thank you very much for speaking to us here on Talking Point Africa.
You're welcome, madam.